At first, this war looked like an air war, stealth bombers, missile strikes, air defenses getting hit. But that may not be where the biggest danger is anymore, because if this fight keeps moving onto the water, the consequences get much bigger. Now, it is not just about Iran, Israel, or the United States, it is about the Strait of Hormuz. And if that starts breaking down, this war stops being just a military story. It becomes a global economic problem. That is what makes this phase of the war so dangerous. A lot of people see the headlines about bombers, missiles, and command posts, but the water is different. Airstrikes can damage targets. The sea can damage the entire system around the war. Oil flows, shipping lanes, insurance costs, import routes, and food supply chains can all get hit at the same time. And that starts with one narrow choke point. The Strait of Hormuz sits between Iran and Oman. It is one of the most important shipping routes on Earth. Reuters has reported that about a fifth of the world's oil and gas supply passes through it, which means even a partial disruption can send shockwaves far beyond the Middle East. That is why the sea gives Iran power even when Iran is under huge pressure. Iran does not need to defeat the US Navy in a classic battle. It does not need to sink an aircraft carrier to create a crisis. It only needs to make the route feel dangerous enough that ships hesitate, insurers panic, and energy traders start pricing in risk. That is a much lower bar. And in a place as narrow and sensitive as Hormuz, that can be enough. We have already seen what that looks like. Reuters reported earlier this month that tanker traffic through the strait collapsed from dozens of daily tankers to effectively zero after the first US-Israeli attacks on Iran and Tehran's move to close navigation. Even when total closure does not last, that kind of disruption changes behavior fast. Ships reroute, cargo gets delayed, markets react long before every last detail is clear. And that is the key point. This is not just about physical damage, it is also about fear. If a ship owner thinks the route is too risky, the effect can be almost the same as an attack. The cargo does not move, the schedule breaks, the cost goes up. That is why maritime pressure is such a powerful weapon in this war. So why can't the US and its allies just secure the route and move on? Because protecting shipping sounds easier than it is. Reuters interviewed experts who said Western powers already spent billions and used major military resources trying to protect shipping in the Red Sea, and even that effort failed to fully stop disruption. Hormuz is even harder. Iran has more capable forces than the Houthis, better access to the water, and the advantage of operating right off its own coast. That matters because geography is doing a lot of the work here. Hormuz is narrow, Iran is close. And that means drones, missiles, mines, patrol craft, and selective harassment can all matter more than people think. The US may still be stronger overall, but strength does not automatically remove risk in a choke point this tight. That is a different kind of military problem, and that helps explain why the war is now pushing harder against Iran's maritime side. The Washington Post reported today that Israel says it killed Alireza Tangsiri, the IRGC Navy commander, in an overnight strike in Bandar Abbas, and framed that move as part of the effort to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. That tells you a lot about how the battlefield is shifting. This is no longer only about inland launchers, nuclear sites, or air defenses. It is also about who can still pressure the sea. But this does not mean the danger is over. Even after heavy losses, Iran may still be able to create instability without enforcing a perfect, permanent blockade. Reuters reported on March 24th that Iran told the United Nations that non-hostile ships could still transit Hormuz. That kind of message shows how Tehran can apply pressure selectively. It does not have to shut everything down forever. It can raise uncertainty, pick targets politically, and keep the rest of the world guessing. And uncertainty is expensive. Maersk said the Middle East has a pressing need for food imports, while Reuters reported that major shipping companies have halted bookings to many Gulf ports, and that Hapag-Lloyd was facing tens of millions of dollars a week in added costs from insurance, fuel, and storage. So even if some ships still get through, the system is already taking damage. That is why this story is much bigger than one naval clash or one strike package. The energy side may be even more serious. Reuters reported today that Barclays sees a prolonged Hormuz disruption, potentially removing 13 to 14 million barrels per day from global oil supply. That would be an enormous shock. Brent crude has already spiked above $100 a barrel in this crisis, and analysts have been warning that if disruption continues into April or May, prices could stay elevated or rise further. And oil is only part of it. Reuters also reported today that the war is choking petrochemical supply through Hormuz and driving plastic prices sharply higher. That means the damage does not stop at fuel pumps. It spreads into factories, packaging, shipping costs, industrial inputs, and eventually consumer prices. This is how a war in one region starts leaking into the wider global economy. That is why the water may be the most dangerous part of this war. Because on land and in the air, the damage is still mostly military. At sea, military pressure turns into worldwide consequences. A strike can destroy a target. A maritime crisis can hit oil, food, shipping, inflation, and political stability all at once. That is a much bigger chain reaction. And there is one more reason this matters. The longer a maritime crisis lasts, the harder it becomes to separate military strategy from economic survival. Countries start scrambling for backup supply. Importers reroute. Governments tap reserves. India said today it had secured 60 days of crude supply to stabilize fuel availability despite the disruption. That is the kind of move countries make when they are worried the shock could continue. So when people ask what the most dangerous part of this war is, the answer may not be the bombers or even the missiles. It may be the water. Because if Hormuz stays unstable, the war gets bigger than the battlefield. It starts reaching into ports, prices, supply chains, and daily life far from Iran or Israel. And that is when a regional war starts becoming a global one.